Okay, so we're on page 8. We're just going to kind of move really quickly on this. We're almost done. Page 8 says approaching with buyers. Best way to approach with buyers is curiosity instead of judgment. I think we talked about that earlier. Is how curious are we when we're working with our buyers? How curious are we? Are we curious or are we more in judgment? And what I mean by that is, how do you respond when a buyer is giving you objections? How do you respond when the buyer is in a place of fear or not wanting to move? How do you respond to that? Do you respond to it with, what's your attitude about it, right? What's your approach and what's your expectation? I'd write those 3 words down. When you're working with business, with buyers, number 1, when you're working with the buyer, what's your attitude about that buyer? Are you bringing your own, junk to the table and judging them because they don't understand the process? What's your attitude about a buyer? Because if things are not going according to plan, you probably have the wrong attitude about the buyer. If you're not coming from curiosity, then you're not giving the buyer a fair shot, right? Number 2 is, what's the approach? Are you approaching them with curiosity, or are you approaching them with judgment? What's your attitude and what's your approach? I think we said it earlier, is the message doesn't change, it's the approach to delivering the message that changes, right? So what is your approach? If you're not getting through to someone, do you give up on that someone, or do you find a different approach? Does that make sense? What is your attitude and what is your approach? And last word is, what is your expectation? What is your expectation? If you expect to earn the buyer, then chances are you'll earn the buyer. What do you expect from it? If you expect to do an open house and you're going to run into clients, you're going to run into potential clients that they're so blown away, so your attitude is, let me bring as much value as I can to the community. Your approach is, let me share with the community what they need to know, what's going on in the market, right? And your expectation is, how do I earn other people? How do I earn more clients, right? What is your attitude? What is your approach? And what is your expectation? Those are 3 words that allow you to see. If those 3 words aren't in alignment, it's going to be really hard to get more buyers. It's going to be really hard to get more clients. What is our attitude? What is our approach? And what is our expectation? Side note, in order to build a strong business, we must be willing to take complete responsibility when things don't go as planned. Let's see, we got one more sponsor spot at 3:05. What time is it right now? So, I learned that working with Nordstrom's for as many years as I had is when something goes wrong, we need to take responsibility, right? So there's blind spots in your business. There's things that you don't know. There's holes in your operations. There's problems in your operations. And when something goes wrong, the first thing to do is for you to ask yourself, what change could I make in my business? Are you with me? What change can I make in my business to minimize the chance of that problem ever happening again? You see what I'm saying? Because if you don't make that change in your business, then you're leaving yourself in that, it's a vulnerable place. It's kind of that what is it? You're only as strong as your weakest link, right? It's the same thing. It's like, what problems do you have in your business that you're not addressing? And the story I like to use is I sold a property to a client of mine, which is also a family member. Sold him a $580,000 house in Elk Grove, and then sold him a country property, which was like another $750,000. That's a pretty good payday, right? So when I sold him the $750,000, he was all excited, never had ranch property. Well, like 4 months into it, his well pump went out. And he calls me and he's angry because he called the home warranty company. And when he calls the home warranty company to figure out, he thought it was a no-brainer. Call the home warranty company and they'll just replace the pump and be good. So he calls me, he's livid. He said, you know what, something went wrong with my well, and the well company is telling me, the home warranty company is telling me that my well wasn't insured. And then all I needed to do was spend another $100 on the home warranty, right? So at that point, he's all, who's responsible for this? Who's responsible for this? I said, you know what, let me look into that, I'll get you back. So I sat back, I looked at the whole model, and I called the title company. I was just doing my recon because I wanted this blind spot to never go away, right? Because it's an issue when your client has a bad experience, and if you're not willing to step up and fix the problem, then can you expect from them to refer more business, right? So I found out that we could have done the add-on. The extra layer of him being a family member made it even more difficult. So I called him on the phone and I said, I fixed the solution, I fixed the problem, but I want to go ahead and cover it for you. He says, what do you mean? I said, I think it was like $1,300. I said, let me just cover it for you. Because I figured that it was a hole in my system that I could fix. Does that make sense? And when I fixed it, I decided to look at the whole thing and what could I do to minimize that chance of happening. So what I did was I looked at the whole process and I said, from now on, all of my buyers, if the buyer's doing a home warranty, the buyer decides to go home warranty, I want the buyer to talk to the home warranty rep directly about the property they're buying. And I want to give the home warranty rep an opportunity to add as much coverage as the buyer wants. Are you with me? Because if the home warranty rep has the opportunity to have those dialogues, and in the same circumstance, if the buyer decides, because usually a seller will only want to pay like for an average size home warranty, right? Usually it's the standard for the most part, right? If the buyer decides not to have that extra coverage and something goes wrong, well, whose responsibility is that point? I'm out of the hot water. Does that make sense? So because of that reason that's what I mean by a blind spot. We all have blind spots in the business, and when something goes wrong, we need to take responsibility for that going wrong. And look at our systems and look at our processes and find out how to avoid from that to happen again. Does that make sense? And I would probably put next to that spot, what are the blind spots in my business, which is huge. We do this day in and day out. We live, breathe real estate. So we forget that each buyer has different wants and needs. We're moving on to the next part. We cannot judge every buyer and put them in the same group. We must come from a place of curiosity so we can tailor our service to help them. We talked about that earlier, right? Uncovering what they expect from buying a home. Kind of that script I shared with you guys. 1 year from now, you've bought your home and you've moved on. What has to happen for you to feel you made the right decision by hiring me? We've talked about that. Tailoring your approach specifically to the person in front of you. So, which is awesome. We also talked about the Miles Monroe quote, which that was a part where you don't talk down to people, right? What do? You talk to them at their level, and then you bring them to your level. Which brings me to my next point, which was an idea that I got from Kevin, which was the 6 layers of protection, but I added the 7th. So it's all coming together now. Here's where it is. We've been talking about building consumer confidence, right? We've been talking about writing down self-discovery. We've been talking about, now we're gonna jump in a little bit more on like peace of mind and overall satisfaction. So when I learned this piece is I looked at it saying, what is this doing for my clients? The 7 layers of protection is designed, in my opinion, to give a buyer peace of mind, right? Buyers spending a lot of money buying a home. So let's go through the 7 layers of protection. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is in the consultation, the fill in the blank. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I know buying a home is a big decision. So whether they bought 10 homes or they bought their first one, this is value to them. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, when you buy a home through me, I'm going to take you through the 7 layers of protection. Number 1, we're going to do an AVID, which is an agent visual inspection disclosure. This is where either myself or someone on my staff will walk through the home and put our eyeballs on it to see if there's anything that we need to be concerned about, which is huge. Number 2, we're going to make sure, remember we talked about this earlier, don't miss the obvious, right? Number 2 is Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we're going to make sure either myself or some of my staff will make sure that you get a complete disclosure package regarding the home, taking you step by step in all the disclosures. Because we want to make sure that you have enough information to make an educated decision. Step number 3, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the 3rd layer of protection, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm going to highly suggest that you get a home inspection. I've had 1 client in the last 15 years that hasn't got a home inspection. I know her name, and both properties that she bought, she's had problems with. One, she bought something that had a major pipe leak that a home inspector would have found. Second one, she found out that the furnace didn't work. And the bottom line, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if you get a home inspection, it's just a fraction of the cost what it would be to fix something like that. So if you decide not to get a home inspection, then I'm going to ask you to sign a waiver, but I'm highly recommending that's a layer of protection. Number 4, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, when you buy a property, as long as you're not buying cash, I will make sure that the property is appraised by a licensed appraiser, right? And that appraiser will come in, they'll look around and make sure that the property is lendable. Does that make sense? They will go room by room, make sure there's no health or safety issues. And also, it protects you from overpaying. Does that make sense, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer? We want to make sure you don't overpay. Next layer of protection is a preliminary title report. I'm going to make sure that we order a full preliminary title report from the title company. That'll give you a chain of ownership from the very first time it was sold until today. Don't you think it's really important for you to know the history behind the home that you buy? Yes, sir. Well, also on top of that, it lets you know if there's any liens or loans against a property. Can you see why that'd be important? Well, great. And lastly, I want to make sure that you get a full title insurance policy for this property. Title insurance policy. So in the event that after you buy this home, if there's any liens or problems from the previous owner that try to attach to your title, that insurance will cover you. So these are the 7 layers of protection that me and my staff make sure that we provide you. Can you see the value with working with us? Do you see what that did? Do you see any of the nervousness that comes to buying a home? Do you see how that provides peace of mind? Is it basic? Yeah. Is it something that already we're doing, but we're not bringing attention to it? Does that make sense? What are your 7 layers of protection? And they're huge. It's a peace of mind. It's a consumer confidence. What are we doing in order to help?
No, not at all. I use Bob. If you have a pain in the ass buyer that's an analytical,
questions on that?
Bob's the perfect guy because he's the most thorough inspector I've ever seen. I highly recommend that I use him.
Yeah, absolutely. Last layer of protection. It was just a test.
Professional. My clients were very meticulous.
It's no particular rule.
And him explaining how things work in the house that they're buying.
I love it. I like it.
Well, in a nice professional.
I like it. Well, that's good. And the 7th layer of protection is the home warranty. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, thank you for that, April.
Hey, Bob, real
Mr.
quick,
and Mrs. Seller, I will make sure
infrared?
to negotiate a home
Yes, we
warranty.
also use
And in this home warranty, you'll be able to have all the major things, all the major things covered. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, can you see why it would be valuable for you to use someone like me? Make sense?
Your average, if
Controls
I
the
look at
emotion.
it with my naked eye, I can't see what's going on, but under a load,
Next,
some of the breakers
you see
work fine,
it's,
but might be dying
it's called
or
Sinapi. You see
running
that?
out, and infrared
So
will show
let me give you what that
breakers
means.
under strain.
Okay?
Also, we've
This is
used
where it
to
gets kind of
find
funny.
these
Sinapi stands
behind,
for subjected
walls and ceilings
to the negative
have
influences
not cured on the ceiling yet. We found one
of other people
where the people that lived in the house for 10 years
and
we
internet
found a leak
influence.
in their ceiling, but
subjected to the
they
negative
said,
influences
"No,
of other
there's no
people
leak there.
and
We've been here for 10 years."
internet
The
influence.
reason why it was in
What the heck does that mean? Means, you know what? Your clients are subjected to the negative influences of other people. How are you addressing that? Which is another amazing tip I got from Mr. Kevin. He's been a huge influence in my business, and I try to find things and try to figure out how I can incorporate them. So the name that we call this guy, which I've added another one to it, Mr. Cooper, is Uncle and Auntie Jed. Let me tell you about Uncle and Auntie Jed. They are the people in your family that know everything about everything, but you know what? They know nothing about nothing. Does that make sense? They're the ones that have bought one home in the last 30 years, and they try to school you and let you know exactly what to do. And in most cases, they will say things that will be in conflict with what you present to the client. So here's what I'm going to propose. If you don't talk about Uncle Jed or Auntie Jed, they're going to mess your deal up. As Kevin said earlier in the panel, that's the third baseman. So I'm going to suggest that in your buyer's consultation, you have a spot that says Uncle Jed, right? And you see there's a little image there for Uncle Jed. And usually what I'll say is, it'll be Uncle Jed on there. So let me tell you a little about Uncle Jed. Uncle Jed is your friend or family member that knows everything about buying and selling real estate. In the event that you meet with Uncle Jed and they say something that's in conflict with me, please let me know, because I'm 110% confident with everything I've shared with you. Now, when that happens, I paint a picture. I paint a picture when I'm training that Uncle Jed's sitting at the barbecue and he's got this really big apron on and here comes Joey coming around. He's flipping hamburgers, and Uncle Jed says, Joey, so what are you doing? What are you up to? And he said, oh, I'm buying a home. And then all of a sudden, as soon as he opens up that can of worms, Uncle Jed starts doing this. So I tell them that Uncle Jed, I give the whole barbecue analogy. As soon as Uncle Jed decides to pollute the transaction, right? Does that client at that moment have more credibility with me or less? Let me say that again. If I tell the buyer about Uncle Jed, and then Uncle Jed shows up, am I having more? I'm not even there. Am I having more credibility or less credibility with that? More. But if you don't take it off the table, Uncle Jed is going to mess your deal up. I have clients that will call me and said, I know who my Uncle Jed is. I'm serious. I know who my Uncle Jed is. I'll give you a story. So I have a guy that I met, and I did probably 4 transactions for him. I sold his sister a home. One day he calls me and said, hey, my nephew just inherited $750,000, $750,000. His dad died unexpectedly, and I'm concerned he's going to spend all his money. Can you help talk to him he thinks he wants to buy, he wants to spend all his money on a home. Can you help talk to him? I said, sure. He's telling me to help his nephew not spend $750,000. So I sat down with the nephew and I said, hey, most people in 22 years old having $750,000, it's like once in a lifetime. So let's really dig in and figure out what we can do and help you guide. What kind of home are you looking for, right? So we're going through the whole consultation and stuff, and he's feeling really comfortable. We found out that he's probably going to land around 550, right? We're thinking worst case scenario, I can hold 200,000. He looks at me, he says, Joey, I got a problem. I go, what? He goes, my uncle tells me to pay cash for my home. And my mom tells me to pay 20% down. What do I do? Well, guess what? His uncle's my client, right? And his mom is my client. So I said, well, tell me more about that. Because I had no idea where to go. And he said, I just know what to do. I'm kind of confused. I said, listen, let's talk a little bit about it. So as I'm talking to him, the right script and approach comes to mind. I said, you know what? They're both right. Your uncle's right and your mom's right. Your uncle's right because your uncle's saying, you know what? If you can buy a home all cash and not have a mortgage, in the long run, you can save money. Right? And your mom's right because you know what? There is a principle in buying real estate that if you can get with the least amount of money, out of pocket and be able to secure real estate, that's great. But here's my challenge. If you decide to buy it with a loan and use your mom's advice, what are we going to do to recapture the percentage that you're paying for your interest? Because right now at the time it was about 4.5%. What are you going to do to recapture it? So what I'm thinking is if you decide to go your mom's route, let's take the remainder of money left over and let's buy you an investment property so you can recapture it. Does that make sense? So when that was all done, when he left, I said, oh my gosh, I hope that worked. So I called his uncle and I talked to his uncle and I said, because at that point I could ruin 2 relationships if I pinned one idea over the next, right? So I called and I told the uncle, I said, hey, he asked me this question. And he goes, so what'd you tell him? I said, well, this is what I told him. He goes, I told him the same thing. Then I called his mom, and I said, I talked to his mom about it. I said, this is where it is, because I wanted everybody to be in alignment. Are you with me? Because his response to me when he called me is, my mom is Uncle Jed. So it was a pretty interesting story. Questions on that? Did I say that too fast, or did that make sense? Yeah, he went ahead and paid cash. He went ahead and paid cash.
My question is, do you have this consultation thing in writing?
Yes.
So what does that look like?
It's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. We can talk about that after the training's over. Okay, so listen, again, I have to say that again, is having the right team is really important. And having the right home warranty rep that will help coach and help your clients to have the right amount of coverage is huge. Are you with me? And in having someone who's willing to interact with your buyers and help them find the right policy is going to help keep you out of the hot water. Does that make sense? So having a consultant that can really work through every one of your clients, like I mentioned to you, that was a blind spot in my business, and I could have lost a really good client. Having the right team behind you is going to make your business run a lot smoother. I'm trying to figure out where I put my notes at. No, I used to for a while, but then they forget about that. They forget about that. So I just get them gifts and things of wine and stuff. And I'm actually gonna have my own wine label released pretty soon. And I decided if I'm gonna give them wine, I might as well give them my own. So I'm excited about that. So let's jump back in. We're almost done. We got 2 more pages to go, and then I got a quick exercise that I want to close with. So buyers' most common objections. This information, you can get it pretty much anywhere out there. The buyer's objections are something that you're going to see over and over again. It's not something that I do a lot of focusing on because it's already out there, but I'm going to go through them really quickly. Buyer's objection number 1 is I don't need any help until I find the home that I like. I don't need any help until I find the home I like. Technology is trying to convince the consumer that they don't need us. Number 2, I'm going to wait until the market goes back down. Seasonal, right? I'm going to wait till the market goes back down. Number 3, I will work with whoever finds me a home. I will work with whoever finds me a home. The challenge with that is you're not bringing enough value, because if you bring enough value, that's not the answer you're going to be getting. Number 4, I already have an agent. Maylee, I already have an agent. Well, great. How long have you been looking for? I've been looking for 9 months. Well, how many homes have you bought? We did that script earlier. Number 5, I don't want to pay too much for a home. The reason why they're saying that is they don't have the consumer confidence they need. I'm going quickly. Number 6, can we just write a lowball offer? The only reason why they're going to say, can we write a lowball offer, is because you haven't shared within the market they're buying in. And you haven't used the numbers. As we went earlier, when you're using the numbers as a tool and you're looking at them, if they're not excited about the home, and if you ask them to rate it on a scale 1 to 10, they give you anything less than a 7, I just take it off the plate. Just take it. You know what? Who's excited about a 7? Let's go find you an 8 or a 9. Make sense? Okay, number 8, I think it's best to work with a listing agent. It's an important one, right? 7, that's what I meant. I'm not sure if I can get a home. Not sure if I can get a home. See, I was just testing you guys.
Being qualified?
Yes. Well, qualified, and I think just affording them as well. Number 8, I think it's best to work with a listing agent. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, did you know that the listing agent's actually contracted with the seller? No, I didn't really think about that. Well, who are they? Who do you think they're going to be invested in? Representing you or the seller? Ooh, I never really thought about that. Yes, exactly. That's why you need an independent party. I don't know if you know, but you actually don't charge me anything. You don't pay for my services. The seller does. So let me help protect you. Make sense? Next, number 9, there are no homes on the market right now. There's no homes on the market in my price range. Well, the bottom line is they don't know the market they're choosing to buy in. Number 10, I'm not in a hurry. The I'm not in a hurry, that's don't come too close. Don't come too close. I still have fear to act. I still have emotional reluctance. You guys with me? So that's what they're telling you, but they don't even know that they're telling you that. Make sense? Next, I want to look at a lot of homes before I buy. The reason why they want to look at a lot of homes before they buy is they don't have the consumer confidence yet. When I first started selling real estate, I'd be showing homes 6-7 months. And now we do a buyer's consultation, and they buy it within the first 5 to 7 days. Why? Because we have a system to build that confidence quickly. Number 12, can you send me properties to my email? Well, that's great. It's definitely something I can do. But before we do that, I'd like to sit down with you and share with you what's going on in the market, put your fingers on the pulse of the market, and give you a clear idea what you'd expect to get for what you want to invest. If they don't want to do a buyer's consultation, we're going back to identifying motivated buyers. That's not a motivated buyer. If somebody's not willing to make a commitment and sit down with me for an hour and me go over the market and the processes, I don't want to spend my time. I like you, but I like my 8-year-old a little bit more. You with me? I'm not going to take time away from my family for people that aren't motivated. Like I said, if I'm talking to another gentleman and I ask him for an appointment, I'm like, hey, I'm not looking for a date. And they start laughing. Say, hey, I want to sit down with you because I want to make sure that you feel comfortable working with me. And number 2, I want to make sure that I can give you what you expect. So what would be a good time for that? Make sense? 13, I can do all the research on my own. Of course you can. Of course you can. If you're saying the same things that the rest internet providers, all these other internet sites are doing, then they don't need you. You're deciding to be a commodity at that point. Does that make sense? It's like the commodity value versus commodity. Commodity is something where they can shop you for price, and they can treat you like you're not specialized. But when the average agent sells 2 to 3 homes a year, they're not really mastery. They're not specialized. That's the majority of our competition. Make sense? So if you're not bringing value and you're not building your value with your client, they're going to commoditize you. And that's how they're going to talk to you. You know, and I can do all the research on my own. Well, great. Let me know how that works for you. Number 14, my friend is a real estate agent. I can appreciate that. Well, let me tell you why that concerns me. Well, what do you mean? If your friend messes up and doesn't take care of your best interest, are you willing to fire them? Well, I never really thought about that. Well, great. You know, I'd expect for you to fire me if I didn't do what you expect of me. Next, my cousin is a real estate agent. We'll just say my family's in the business. I say cousin because I'm Italian. Cousin. And my cousin, you know. I've got to wake you guys up a little bit. So with the whole family member script, I say, well, my family member's a realtor, or my cousin's a realtor. I'll say, well, let me ask you a question. If something goes wrong in the process and your cousin doesn't take care of you, your family member doesn't take care of you, are you prepared to fire them? Some of you are saying that's the same as the other one. No, the objection handler is a little bit different. Well, I never really thought about that. Well, think about this. If you fire them, Thanksgiving will never be the same, right? And that's what I get. Thanksgiving will never be the same. And people just laugh. And what is it? We'll sit down with you, give you a consultation, give you a clear idea of what we do differently. And at the end, you can work with Cousin Vinny, or you can do what most buyers do, choose to work with an aggressive team like we have. So, questions on that? Okay, number 16, I can just buy when prices go down more. I can just buy when prices go down more. Yeah, you can do that. Let me know how that goes for you. Number 17, I'll call you when I'm ready to buy. I'll call you when I'm ready to buy. If somebody's telling you I'll call you when I'm ready to buy, what they're really saying is you haven't convinced me. This is important for you to think about. You write this down. I can't change anybody's mind. I can't change anybody's mind. But I can get them to make a new decision based on new information. So the question is, what information are they missing? What information are they looking for? And that just simply means you haven't peeled back the layers enough. Make sense? Last page. Strategies for submitting a winning offer. Number 1, I know the panel talked a lot about that earlier, so it's going to be a review. I'll go rather quickly. Number 1, tell your buyer's story to your listing agent. Tell your buyer's story to the listing agent. I would call the listing agent, build rapport with them, and get an idea, just let them know, hey, this is my buyer, this is the story. Just do whatever I can to create rapport with them, but actually have a connection. Aaron's right. There's a lot of people who send over offers, and they just, they think this is an impersonal business. Let me send over an email. If you're getting 9 offers, what are you doing to differentiate yourself? Why? They're not going to get paid any less because they choose your offer over someone else. The question is, they want certainty, right? What are you doing to give the listing agents certainty? You got to give them the certainty they're looking for. I know Kevin talked a little bit about how to build stronger offers, but what are you doing to build certainty with that listing agent? Make sense? Number 2, call the listing agent and gather intel. Gather as much intel as you can about what the seller wants. What does the seller want? Do they need a rent back? Aaron touched that earlier. Gather intel before you write an offer. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I know you're really, really excited about about this home. Before we write an offer, let me call the listing agent. Let me gather some intel. I want to position you in a really strong place. And the reason why I say that to them is I say, I don't want you to fall in and out of love. You with me? You find this property, this is what I'm going to do. But they already know that in my consultation. Okay? Next. Yeah. Well, if they don't answer the phone, then send a text message and send an email. Number 3, have your lender call and discuss in depth the strength of your buyer. Have your lender call, as Aaron mentioned earlier in the panel, have the lender call and discuss the strength of your buyer. It's huge. Number 4, run comparable sales and submit your offer to justify pricing. That's also a good one as well. I think as the market's beginning to change and where prices will get a little bit softer, I think it'll be more pertinent. Every time I run a market report, I also even have my buyers sign the market report, so that way they acknowledge why they're doing that. So, which is huge. Let's see. Number 5, write an as-is offer with short time frames to secure the property based on what you saw. Write an offer as is based on what you saw. Right? As is, sellers love as is, right? Well, it's as is based on what I saw. Mr. and Mrs. Listing Agent, I have really bad news. We did the home inspection and we found out that there's $12,000 worth of damages. I'm so sorry, I need to send over a cancellation to you. And Listing Agent, wait. Cancel it? What's the problem? Right? Because you did as is, you want to stay in integrity. Well, it looks like it needs a new roof. Are you sure about that? Did you get a couple bids? Yeah, I did. Let me call the seller and see what I can do for you. So the as-is gets you in the door, right, based on what you saw. Remember, stay in integrity. Staying in integrity is huge. It's based on what you saw. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, the listing agent will try to help you out as long as you're not being out of integrity. Does that make sense? Number 6, I know this happened a lot in the down market. Submit your offers with proof of funds and DU findings. Submit your offer with proof of funds and DU findings. DU findings are basically underwritten findings. Findings that are letting them know if there's any potential property challenges with the loan, if there's any questionable ratios. Your lender can tell you a little bit more about that. Number 7, have your buyer request for you. This is a good one, and I know a lot of you have not went through this, but I've done this a lot in commercial. In the event, in order to make your buyer look stronger, a lot of times in the commercial arena and some of the bigger properties, the agents kind of get in the way. And when I sense an agent is getting in the way of presenting an offer, right, is I will literally ask the buyer's agent or the buyer to say, hey, I think there's a challenge here. Can we let's go ahead and construct a good offer, but I'd like if you're comfortable with this, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'd like you to stipulate the opportunity for me to present the offer to the seller with the listing agent present. Does that make sense? So listing agent and the seller's there, I'm presenting the offer in behalf of my buyer. There's some situations I've done it on big commercial deals. I've also done it on some luxury properties as well, where I really feel, now in the market we're in right now, the inventory is a little tight. It's not going to be as, how do I say this? They're not going to be as open to it, but when the market gets tighter, right, and there's a lot more inventory, and we're, they're fighting over the right buyers, it does work, and I've done it several times, and it works really effective because you're able to present the offer based on your intentions of getting it done. Make sense?
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah.
In the event that is not a practicality, I have been presented the whole offer, even if it's over the phone, to the listing agent. And then when they turn around and talk about your offer, they're just going to repeat everything you just told them.
Yeah, that's good too. Oh, absolutely. Number 8, when submitting an offer, write a summary email about the offer in your email or cover letter. It's pretty basic. Price, days of close, contingency period, therefore. Just a summary of your offer. If you're getting 9 offers and one of them has an offer summary, it makes it a lot easier. Let's see. Number 9, write a love letter with pictures. I think that's pretty explanatory. Number 10, build a rapport with the listing agent. We've talked about that, a lot of it. And number 11, give a seller rent back option at no cost. I know we went through that quickly, but it's pretty... Yeah.
Can you do 4 and 10?
Nope. We're done. We're out of time. Number 4, running comparable sales and submit with your offer to justify pricing. And what was the other one?
10.
It's going to cost you. Build rapport with the listing agent. What's that? Number 10, build rapport with the listing agent. What about 9? Right. Write a love letter. Write a love letter.
11.
3.
Okay. Guys, I got one more exercise, so I got to close off. So just real quick, number 11 is give a seller a rent back option at no cost. Number 3, last one, have your lender call and discuss in depth the strength of your buyer. Here's the thing, guys. We've done a lot. We've done a lot today. And the thing is, I know you guys are really in information overload. So I'm going to take you guys through an exercise that will really help you out. Okay, so I want you to put your pens down, turn your manuals over, and just take a deep breath, okay? And there's, you know, like I mentioned to you guys earlier, there's some of you in the room that are struggling financially right now. There's some that are struggling with being discouraged, whether or not they want to continue staying in the business. There's some of you that are struggling with the idea that they don't want to be working this hard in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So with that said, there's shifts that need to happen in your business. There's shifts that need to happen. Remember I mentioned to you guys before is we know what we want, but we don't know what we need, right? So with that in mind is we have to really be open to thinking bigger and figuring out how to get us whatever that shift is in our business, whatever that shift is. And that shift, you know, a lot of times people look for huge shifts in the business. And only you can find that shift. Does that make sense? You know, and you got to decide, are you going to build a team? Are you going to possibly diversify income? What does this next transition look like? You came here hoping to get something. And I think the biggest part of it is you're not sure what you were hoping to get. Because if that, you know, that wisdom that I got, we know what we want, but we don't know what we need, it's huge. And when you think about the $1 billion corporation when it comes to coaching, a lot of the coaching and training firms are always telling you they're telling you what you need, but they're not doing an individualized approach. And here's the thing, with all the distractions, Facebook and social media and the telephone and crying babies and radios and TVs and emails, there's so much clutter that we haven't taken time just to be quiet for a minute. So I'm going to ask you guys to close your eyes for 60 seconds. I want you to clear your mind completely, okay? And then I want to read something to you. And I want you to be in a place of receiving, right? I want you to be in a place of receiving whatever you get. But clear your mind and let me read this quote out to you. Okay? You guys ready? Okay. Until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back concerning all acts of initiative and creation. There is one elementary truth, that ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commit oneself, province moves to. All sorts of ideas will come that no man would have dreamed, a whole stream of events and issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidences, meetings, and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it, because boldness has genius, magic, and power in it. Begin it now. So, as that quote was being written to you, read to you guys, you got a picture or you got a word. And if you want to be transparent about what it is, you can, but I know you did. And that's your next step. That's the piece that you're missing. That's, if you were to take all of the clutter and you look at all of that training, that's your next move. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. And if you want to stay in contact with us, visit our booth on the way out. Guys, have a great evening. You're welcome, man. You're welcome. I told you. Yes. Yeah, right out front.